I wanted to cover these topics today, like basically covering our roadmap. But before, I also want to cover like how we got to that roadmap to kind of verify some of the things with everyone. So we'll go through a little bit of market trends that we evaluated and some of the strategic priorities that we set. Then we'll get to the top priorities. We have 7 this year, and then there's some other priority details, and then all the events that we're going to hold this year. So that covers all of the work that we're going to do in 2024. Go to the next one. So we looked at like the broadly like the market trends that'll be driving 2024 in 3 buckets. Like one is regulatory and legal. The other is like what's happening in the industry, and then third is the macroeconomic environment. So regulatory conditions, it's not news for anyone. Like privacy regulations are going to get introduced in newer and newer regions. We'll have 3 more new states going live with regulations: Texas, Montana, and Oregon. And then we have Brazil and India that are creating rules similar to the GDPR national rules regulations for privacy and with their own DPA-like structures. And then we are also waiting for the European TCF ruling that's pending. And on the industry side, like we are seeing like more and more walled gardens ad networks, like retail media networks, becoming mature and taking shape. And then AI also presents like numerous opportunities and challenges for the industry. Sustainability, I think it's going to be a big focus for all the brands, as the government, especially Europe leading that, will be asking for more reporting and transparency into sustainability efforts. And then, given the privacy regulations and the technical regulations from Apple and Google initiatives, we are going to see a continuous loss of signals throughout the supply chain, and preparing for that would be one of the priorities. On the economic side, it's been going on for some time. That slowing marketplace growth, post-COVID hangover, recession fears hasn't happened yet, but we still wanted to account for that in all our planning, especially with the economic and geopolitical uncertainty. 2 of the biggest democracies are going to have their elections. They always have changes and impacts on the processes and systems there. And I think UK, the 3rd largest democracy, is also preparing for an election soon after that. So with that background, if you can go to the next slide, like privacy sandbox, we think is going to be a big focus for everybody on how to adapt to that. We set these as the priorities. One thing that we decided after discussion a lot with our board members and a lot of our members, one of the feedback that I got continuously was like, you've released too many things too fast, and industry needs time and space to adopt something and then move on to the next one. So we're going to focus a lot this year on adoption of existing standards versus trying to release too many new. So we try to limit the releases to only absolutely necessary standards and new things. Expanding the awareness with brands and agencies to drive adoption of standards, that's going to be one big focus. So we already have like one event planned for brand and agency day in May, and then we are also talking to several brands to do smaller sessions with them throughout the year on educating them of the value of standards and which ones they should be looking at based on their priorities. So we'll be working with brands this year a lot. The other is engage with retail media networks. We already started last year an effort in OpenRTB to add extensions or add features to enable like SKU-based advertising in programmatic. We'll do more and more work with retail media vertical in this year. Then we also want to research like trusted execution environment or server environments, as some call them, supported by a PETS framework. This is also part of the privacy sandbox, a TE service. So we want to start exploring that, as we think that is where the future is. Maybe it's not like this year or immediately afterwards, but in the next 2 to 3 years, the industry does need to understand and adopt and integrate TEs in their stacks, and develop more focus on measurement technical frameworks across different environments. That continues to be our effort, and research solutions to any challenges and opportunities presented by artificial intelligence. So we've created a subcommittee of our board members to help us guide on artificial intelligence, like where AI is going, what are its applications, what are the guardrails for advertising industry. So they are working on a report or sort of a guidance slash white paper that should come out sometime in the middle of the year, and we'll pick that up and see what needs to be done. So we had asked them to give us a 3 to 5 year vision on that. And then we'll continue the work on privacy and addressability through evolution of like several. There's been multiple technical work that we're going to do this year. That's the main necessary work that we've kind of focused on new stuff. And then releasing the advanced TV technical standards, so which is basically the creative ID framework. So that's going to be a big push from our side to provide the framework and have the adoption of registered creative ID in all of the digital buys on video. So those are the kind of 8 priorities. Out of that, we have like 7 priorities that we define typically 5 every year, 5 that we cannot miss. And this year, there are 7 because of a lot of work on the adoption. The 3 fall in the adoption category, and then 4 are really new work. So on the new work side, we are going to keep expanding the GPP architecture to all the 3 states and Brazil and India if the rulemaking in India happens in time. So, and then the privacy sandbox gap analysis for Chrome, that's already out. Most of you may have already had a look at it. We will do the Android version as soon as the Android APIs are ready later on. And then the creative ID framework, like I was saying, is one of the top priorities on the TV/video side too. So we've created a framework. We're making multiple changes to support this. One is there is a creative ID framework, which we are working with registered creative ID bodies like the AdID. And then we are also working with the Belgian JIC that manages the creative ID there. We'll also be talking to France, Italy, like we're talking to all the regions, Clearcast in UK, and JJ, I was going to reach out to you like for the similar in Australia and New Zealand.
Yeah.
So the idea is to have a framework where if you have a creative ID, then you should be able to validate it with the agency that has issued it, that it's a valid creative ID, and you should be able to get some basic metadata about the creative ID that everybody needs for measurement, reconciliation, and setting up the campaigns. So it's not all of the data that you typically see, like there are like 14 to 20 fields that people carry, companies carry, but we are really looking at 4 or 5 to kind of standardize as the minimum set. And then we'll maintain a directory on the Tech Lab tools portal where anybody can go and check, okay, this is the ID, this is the API, this is how I need to go and check for it with the agency. If I'm in this region, I should go and register it with this agency and then use that. So we're going to make a big push for that Q2 onwards on adoption side. We're getting pretty good response. I was at the WFA summit in New York in January, and we were going to present this there. But even before our presentation, this was identified as a big need. So it's kind of a validation both from the publisher side as well as the editor side that this is something that is very much needed. And it's nothing new, like it's been used on the linear side for decades. So we're not really asking for something new. We're asking how to make sure that it is also widely used on the digital side. And this can act as the unifying, ID between linear and digital convergence and be able to use that. So that's going to be a big push from our side on a lot of resources invested in it. We are also changing the VAST to support this. So you will see that, I think, in a month and a half. I think Katie would probably send out the initial version of it for release. So we are adding extensions to VAST 2.0 so that if you're using 2.0, but because there's no creative ID field in there, you can use that. If you're using VAST 4.0, we'll issue guidance on. One of the feedback we got was that 4.0 requires creative ID, and a lot of the advertisers don't provide creative ID, so I can't upgrade to 4.0 because I can use it. So we're going to provide guidance on how you can still use 4.0 even if you don't have a creative ID. So kind of moving people, no matter which version you're on, to be able to use the creative ID framework in that version of VAST. So that's on the video side, and then on the privacy sandbox, if you saw, we released today the first set of attributes to use in OpenRDB to support privacy sandbox. So privacy sandbox, if you've been in touch with like all the latest, it's kind of a sequential system that first you will do a full like OpenRDB transaction, and then you will want to go into the privacy sandbox auction after that. So there are some signals needed to understand whether this transaction would go into privacy sandbox or not. So that's what was released today to kind of enable that. But going forward, we're going to make sure that OpenRDB is compatible with the sandbox and any other on-device system that comes on later on. So that work's going to be done. On the adoption side, this was another request to create cookbooks or guidance on how to use the protected audience APIs specifically. So we're going to work on that. So these guidance would be like one for SSP and publishers, one for DSP and buyers, and one for other ad tech service providers like verification providers and others. So we'll probably end up having like 3, if not all 3, then at least 2 this year on how to effectively use the sandbox. Then there's to support the Creative ID framework, we're going to conduct an AdOps workshop middle of the year for all the CDD companies to help and the invitees in this will be ad operations people to help them understand the need and how to use that Creative ID framework. And then a lot of brand and agency content development. Like I was saying, like we have one whole day of event in May, a brand and agency day. And then we are also working on smaller content to work with brands. We're talking to 2-3 brands and having like individual sessions with them. And same thing we are ready to hold with agency holding companies too and their clients if they want to do that. So those are the big 7 priorities. We can probably skip. I mean, if you can, I can stop here. Like if you have questions.
Yeah, I was thinking it might be worth just checking in because you've got 3 very big initiatives that we're talking about there in and around sort of GPP and privacy, because in Australia we're going through the privacy review now. So it's interesting to see India go through those steps just before us. So that's something that's going to come into play. And then obviously advanced TV and the creative ID piece is big and brave. So that joining from a sales management perspective, joining linear and addressable screens is that, I mean, that's really big and brave. And then privacy sandbox. So it's probably good that we just check in with everyone to see if there's any questions in and around particularly these big rocks.
Yeah, or anything that you think like should be a top priority and you don't see it here.
Shelly, it's Peter here. It's nothing to do with any of the things on the screen here. It's actually about something you mentioned earlier around OpenRTB protocol in as it relates to retail media. So you're engaged obviously with Jeffrey and then obviously all the retailers as well. Are you kind of pointing that at sponsored listings? And if so, are you making progress in kind of pulling retailers into that journey?
Yeah, so we took on the work that I don't know if you were the Kevil folks were doing, if you were aware of that. So we've taken that work on, and that's now part of this IAB Tech Lab work. So that's the first part that we're going to work on, essentially what Kevil was trying to do. And most of the companies, I don't remember names top of my head of everyone, but all the companies that were involved in the Kevil effort, like they're all part of the working group. And it was like
okay. So, but is there kind of like a timeline? I think Kevin said PubMatic were involved, but we weren't actually. I don't know where they got that from. But is there any kind of like loose kind of framework or timeline?
I think it'll be Q2, early Q2 or so, or mid Q2 when you would get that out. I know there was a little bit of drama on who was involved and who was not on that side, so we had to spend some time in November, October to clear that up and get the working group ready. But yeah, it's being discussed regularly in the supply chain working group meetings. So it's progressing.
Anyone else? I wouldn't mind knowing the timings for the ADOP CTV workshop, if there's any way that we can at least share some collateral or post-meeting insights, or even somehow virtually attend. Is that an in real life meeting, is it?
Yeah, that'll be an in-person meeting. It'll be like a half day starting around noon till evening in New York time zone. I could look at like doing a broadcast, but if the time zones permit, but at that time, like even Europe's kind of in the evening mode, and
yeah,
you all are not yet woken up, so
at least if we have some actionable insights or takeaways that we can
share
with the different councils here that would be interested.
Yeah, I can share all the presentations and all that were made there, and if there's we haven't decided, but whether we, like last time when we did a workshop like this for video, we kind of issued like a summary of it. As a white paper, like a 4 or 5 page summary of everything. So I'll look at something like that. It's likely going to be after we release the framework and everything. So, early Q3, that time frame.
Thank you. Okay. And with the update you mentioned with OpenRTB and Sandbox, we can share that amongst the relevant councils and members, and locally here we'll bang the drum.
Yep, that's out for public comments. So we are looking for comments from everywhere. It's open until March 22 for comment, and then we would try to close it as soon as we can. And you may be all aware, like we've got a huge list of feedback from Google that needs to be assessed.
Yeah, and you had a meeting today, right? As the working group.
Yeah, it's a Monday. It meets Monday morning. So we had a meeting today to figure out a plan going forward, like how we're gonna manage everything, get this final version out, and then what are the next steps. So we go to the last slide. I just want to cover.
Sorry.
Sure that people. Yeah, so those are the 7, not the 7 only things that we're going to do. So there's other stuff that we're going to do. So just to cover on the adoption side, we do have the learning and development program for the lawyers and policy teams. So we're going to, we got very good feedback last year. It was always oversubscribed. So we're going to continue at least 2-3 sessions of that this year again. The privacy working group wants to create like a GPP implementation guide to help people adopt it faster. And then on the addressability and pet side, there's work on one is ID, managing the overall addressability portfolio. This might happen towards later part of the year. Like now, given like after all these years of new work and new solutions, we have like a bundle of solutions for addressability. So we are trying to figure out like how we present that for the industry's intake as to how can you assess your inventory, like what works for you, what doesn't work for you, and what are the solutions that are available for different types of scenarios. And then on the supply chain foundations, we're going to keep on working on explainers for tools portals, the APIs for tools portals that you can use. And then a little bit more work on the CTV for OMSDK. So we'll have like, we already have the Android and the tvOS versions. We are working on Samsung and LG now. And then we are still talking to Roku about their version. So we'll have like 5 or 6 different, and they're all, that space is a little fragmented. So we thought it'll be good to have like an explainer for how to use that. On the spec and deliverable side, there's the DSA version 2 for Europe that we'll release. We did the version 1 this year, the final version of the accountability platform, and then we'll continue making the updates to the GPP library as needed, and then GPP for a string for Brazil and India, depending on how those countries progress on their rulemaking. On the addressability in pets, we have been talking with Google about their pair protocol, because pair and OPGA kind of solve the same problem. There's no point having two things doing the same thing in the industry. So
Yeah.
we are trying to figure out a way forward that pair becomes an industry thing, and there's an OPGA converged version of pair. There's a work that started last week was an ID-less guidance. So environment, especially the iPhone environment, which is affected by ATT, where there is no ID of any kind, what are the different solutions you can use for those ID-less environments? Data clean rooms for measurement, that is progressing pretty well and should be done in Q2 sometime, mid Q2 or so. So this is kind of like OPGA, it's kind of OPGAM. Like how do you use clean rooms for, how do you tokenize your match keys? How do you use data clean rooms for reconciling and measurement between multiple parties? And then there was an ask for a sort of a glossary of pets and personalizing in a post-cookie world. So that's on our list of things. We'll see if we have time afterwards or not. And then VAST 4 updates, like I said, to support the Creative ID framework. So initially, we did a survey with the industry. The feedback was to deprecate 2.6 and just X and just focus on 4.x. But once we sat down in the working group, people kind of said that why don't you just make it available in both and let the market figure out the deprecation themselves.
Right.
So that's why we are doing updates in both. And then on the supply chain side, retail media network programmatic subgroup deliverable, that's one of the top priorities in that working group. Like I mentioned, like AI and advertising guidance that will come out in the middle of the year. And then ads TXT crawler, we are updating the frequency to 5 times a week now from 3. So that'll be available. It does cost extra because it just costs us extra around 2 more days of crawling. And then we are also introducing something called priority domains, where we got this feedback from existing customers that there are certain domains that they want definitely and others they don't care about as much. So we'll include that to make sure that those domains are always crawled and properly checked and nothing gets missed on those domains. So they get priority over others. On the OMSDK side, again, on the deliverables, the Android sandbox has something called an SDK runtime that changes how the SDKs operate inside your apps. So for that, we will have to change the Android SDK for OMSDK. We've been talking to the Android team. They've been pretty helpful in developing features that we need to support OMSDK features. So that will be one of the things that we'll work on this year to have an updated version that works with the Privacy Sandbox runtime. Podcast measurement guidelines, they were released last week, so that's already done. This guidelines takes care of 3 things mainly. One is it updates the guidance for players, and then second one is it takes care of the it separates the metrics from measurement. So and it describes like different measurement methods, whether when you are the hosting podcast server versus the redirect method of other measurement providers that are using that. And the third one is around how do you filter for things and how do you filter for technology changes. Like last year, Apple introduced this auto download that kind of gave a wrong figure because if you switch your device or change your ID or something, it would download all the podcasts like in the series that you listen to, whereas you're not going to listen to all of them. So it provides methods on how do you handle broadly like these kind of technical changes and better filtration. Yep, that's all the other work.
It's a busy roadmap, Shaylee.
Yeah, so that's what we'll focus on, those 7 and this. Everything else will be done if we have the bandwidth and if we have resources.
Yeah.
Shayla, can I jump in? I know this work is being led by GARM, but you guys are jumping in. The work that's being done by AdNet Zero on media frameworks. How much involvement has Tech Lab got in that from a digital channel point of view?
So we are fully involved in that. We are actually in a waiting mode right now. So we're waiting for GARM to finish they're finishing the holistic benchmarking work so that calculators and all can use them. So we are waiting for that. Once that happens, then we will do the next set of work on, how does it translate to digital, and if there's any telemetry that's needed in the OpenRTB. So we're sort of in a waiting mode since I think September, October.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, it's there in our priority 2 items, things that we put, like if something comes up and we have bandwidth, and or if it becomes urgent because of any other industry change, then we'll do those things.
I know they're just talking about releasing stuff at Cannes, so I'm presuming that, which isn't that far away. So we'll see.
Yeah,
we'll see what's ready.
I was hoping that they would have completed in December or latest in January. That was my expectation, but I haven't heard anything yet.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions or feedback on some of these critical topics? I mean, I personally found the DSA side of things pretty fascinating. The expectation there of the bigger platforms, the level of transparency, the way that will actually be managed operationally is, once you dig into it, it's full on.
Yeah, it's a lot more taxing than TCF, I guess.
Yeah. So we did some updates on that on the accountability platform, which is a great piece of work in terms of being able to almost audit the adherence to consent signals through the pipes. We do locally want to do a lot to support the foundational standards are in and around all things supply chain and transparency. So that's something we want to be including into the tools portal and the database there, a lot more Australian inputs, just so you know. I think we swapped notes on that before.
Yeah.
There's any other questions on this, or we can have a quick look at the priority 2s, perhaps? Is that where you wanted to go next, Shaylee?
No, I wasn't planning to go on priorities 2. I don't think they're in this deck.
Okay.
So this next few slides just explain the top 7. If you just want to flip through, I've mostly talked about everything, but this just explains like what are the challenges here and what's the initiative going to be. We can flip through it. If I notice something that I missed, I'll call it out. Yeah, I think I've covered everything here. Yeah, we can cover the next one. Covered this one. This we covered. This we've already released, so
yeah. Just to go back to this, so as we await the sort of next round of engagement with government here locally, we have tried to build some awareness around the architecture and the way it's supported in other markets. Obviously Europe, but the different states in the US and what's coming in Brazil and India. So we just have to wait and see what the next round of engagement looks like, whether it's another round of consultation or we have to respond to draft legislation. But we do want to start weaving in what the work that you're doing, and we've highlighted it in the past. But let's see.
Yeah, so the way like the engagement here would be like as soon as you think like the government is ready with the regulation, we would want to, an association as IAB Australia, kind of spin up like a local policy group that kind of helps define from a legal perspective what the policy is on all of those, how the legal translates that into business. And then, then we look at creating immediately after that, the next step is the GPP string and guidance and how do you enable that?
Yeah, and that's why it's been interesting to actually see the process in India just kick off from that perspective. That's been good to see. So anyone on the call that wants to be across that, I mean, we tried to include all the people with APAC responsibilities and responsibilities with India, but that's something that you can be included in if you wish to have a look. I know a few of you have asked about that in the past.
Yeah, so we already started the CDs to. I don't know if you're aware of the CJPP that IAB had created, which is like a cross-jurisdictional repository of like all the regulations and how they the different constructs of the regulations. So we have started that work in India now to update the India chapter with the DPDPA, and then because the rules are not ready yet, so we can't get into like policy yet. But as soon as that's done, we'll get into the policy making and then the GPP stream. So that's my tomorrow 5 a.m. So probably evening time here.
Yeah, it's quite late. I mean, I'm on the invites. I think a couple of people on this call are, but it's just good. It's just good for us to be across it here in Australia.
If you or anyone if you're a global company and you can have like somebody in a better time zone participate, especially from your legal teams, that'll be great.
Yeah, so a couple of vendors, we've done that. We've connected them with the locals, and I looped in Shivendra too.
Yeah. Okay. This I talked about in detail. And then this is the OpenRTB, basically what to signal in bid request, like how do you signal the that you are going to run a sandbox auction after the thing, and then we're looking at more things. One of the things might end up being like mapping some of the terminologies so that when you're building, you can know, okay, this field's the one that's going to go into this field there.
Yeah.
That kind of.
Yeah, we'll push this out as these have just come out. We'll do that here locally. We'll bang the drum.
So these are all the 2 and 3s all together by each pillar. So in privacy, like the priority 2 is continue the L&D program for lawyers. And then we also are planning like board of director company lunch and learns as a benefit to board members. And priority 3 is to have like, since like COVID's being forgotten now, we want to have in-person working group meetings. People wanted to have that off and on. And then on the spec and deliverable side is the one is the evaluation of the privacy implications of privacy sandbox itself. How does it play between permissions user is given on privacy sandbox versus what they put in GPP or TCF or any other regulation? What's the crossover there? Those kind of things. iOS 17 impact on GPP because of the privacy manifest and a couple other features that iOS 17 has introduced. GPP library updates, they keep going on. So I always put them in priority 2 because they just follow something that's already been done. And then GPP Brazil and India, I put in 2, not knowing when they'll be ready. That dependency exists. And then in the priority 3, we have PIAT. I don't know if you've heard of PIAT, but there is a whole effort on. This is a whole effort on trying to do like what's the next generation of privacy. We've done the first generation, which is just complying with regulations with TCF and MSPA and other things.
Yeah.
But you make it more sustainable and future proof. So there's one thing called the due diligence standard that is being worked on right now. Like how do you ensure due diligence with vendors and your partners? And the other is having a standardized privacy taxonomy, so everybody understands the same term in the same way when you put it in agreements or when you're trying to do a partnership or integrate something with your partner companies.
Right, so that's a whole new set of another set of taxonomies there, Tev.
Yeah. So basically, we target top 7 as 100%. Priority 1, we target 80% of priority 1, and priority 2, we target to complete like 50% of these based on what is the industry need. And then
Okay.
there's some prioritized stuff, things that we have decided not to continue working on.
Okay. Well, I think in terms of the general content, there's a lot there.
Yep.
I do want to give the opportunity for any questions or any feedback or any queries about anything really from anyone in the room. Or if you have any questions of us, Shaylee, what are we up to over here?
Yeah, main question I keep asking everyone is wherever I'm presenting it, like, is there anything that you think is important for your region or for your company that you didn't see us covering, like that's really critical and that needs a standard or needs work by IAB or IAB Tech Lab?
I was wondering actually where you had AI consent signals. I know that's fallen off the priorities because of the discussions around made for advertising and sort of synthetic content here, whether there's considerations around being able to have a signal so that you can ascertain whether it's human created content or whether it's synthetic content.
Yeah, that's a good question. Like for MFA, we did kind of what we did with MFA was like we didn't define MFA as a signal. We published as a blog post like guidance that there are enough signals in the OpenRTB that you can demand to be published and to be sent to you that you can use to assess the MFA based on your level of threshold.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of the same thing what I'm hearing with AI. Like everyone's going to have different thresholds. It is something like, you know, if a journalist at CNN is investigating something, but he's using AI to write the whole thing because he's doing the hard work on the ground and he's using a machine to do the back work. Is that like a bad thing? Like, do you even need to know that it's AI generated? Images and videos, yeah, for the fake part and all that. And that's something like that's not really an open RTB thing. It should be handled at a different level altogether with the AI companies, with the major content distribution companies like Meta and others should be handling that at that level itself.
Yeah.
So it's not clear, like it's still kind of early stages as to how advertisers are going to view all of that. And given that advertisers might want to actually take advantage of AI and use AI themselves for their creatives.
Yeah.
How will they position themselves? Like I'm using AI for a brand ad, but hey, it shouldn't advertise my content on an image that's created by AI.
So yeah.
Be a difficult position for anyone. So it's still early. Like we have to wait and watch like how it plays out. Like where do they really land at? I mean, if you see OpenAI Sora, I saw that and I was like, wow, like 30-second ads is done. Like any brand manager sitting in the room can create a 30-second ad and like 100 of those in an hour.
Maybe one day movies, who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so we're going to produce some guidance around that, which is pretty similar, but just to look out for those signals of just too many ads and just general quality and the structure of the page and unsustainable activities. There is some fairly basic operational.
AI guidance that we're writing right now, it's still not done fully, but the outline kind of explains AI some basic terms that people understand, like things, what they need to be careful of. It does talk about privacy in AI. I think that is an important topic for everybody to understand because the model kind of never unlearns. Like once your information inside the model, you can't take it out, basically.
Yeah.
So that people need to understand some of the ethics part, like guardrails, some evaluation criteria. Like if a vendor comes to you and they are going to use AI, how do you evaluate that they are properly and ethically using the artificial intelligence component? So it will contain those kind of things to start with, and then as AI kind of seeps more into our daily lives, probably figure out if it needs any signaling or other guardrails.
Yeah, we had an early submission last few months ago actually into government on that, sort of an initial investigation into. So we'll see where that goes, that next round of consultation with government on that topic.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the government part, we had Senator Blackburn at ALM, and this question was asked to her,
Right.
like, you know, how are you going to regulate AI? So it seems she was pretty clear, like they're not going to regulate AI as such, but they will probably end up regulating the application of AI. Like they might say you cannot use it in this, or you can only use it in this particular way. So that's where at least the US regulators, that's how they're thinking of controlling and regulating the outcomes and applications versus the technology itself.
Well, if we see anything of real interest come out here locally on the back of what's been going on, we'll definitely share that.
Yeah, if there's anything like that is really important and people are really wanting some guidance in that, send it to us. Like we can pass it to the subcommittee, the board subcommittee, that people do want to understand this.
So I do want to give a here we are, a question on CIMID.
CIMID, yes. So as part of this Creative ID framework, we are going to include extensions for CIMID, etc. in 2.0, so that you're not blocked from using CIMID if somebody's on 2.0. So that'll be enabled. And if you're on 4.0, it's already enabled. I've gotten a lot of inbound on CIMID in the last 3-4 months. Seems like there is a lot of demand. And there's another project that we're doing in partnership with IAB, is the ad formats for CTV. So
right, which you provided guidance on about a year ago, right? The video formats. There was some guidance.
That was more on resolution and minor changes, but this has a lot more formats. This will have like CIMID type application of, you know, using QR code.
Right.
Something called a pause ad that's becoming very popular here. When you pause your screen and the ad comes up, so that formatting and that description. And then there was also asked to have display ads because of how much time we spend trying to search for something to watch. That's
right.
a good real estate. So they're looking at display ads in the navigation areas.
All right. Well, if there aren't any more questions, I'd really want to know when you're going to come see us, Shailey. Is it just when India tour Australia for cricket, or can we tempt you over with events?
We keep losing to Australia, so I'm not coming there for cricket. Something else.
Not as bad as England.
No plans yet, but yeah, let me know your events where you need us. We'll plan something. Yeah,
again, I do plot and plan to try and find a way of incorporating a visitor into Singapore and maybe over here in New Zealand, but let's see where we go. But
something around ATS Singapore, I think we will go there again. So yeah, there's something around that. We can plan that.
But look, I'm so sorry about the little technical glitches as we wrestle with Teams. I'm so sorry about that. But thank you so much for your time, and thank you to everyone else for making the time to listen to Shailey. And if there's any questions that come through, I'll share them with you. And thank you so much. It's lovely to see you again.
You're welcome. Happy to help anytime.